This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather Ho, there's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, October 21st, 1980, kind of continuing the theme of almost every on this day being about baseball, we got ourselves this thing. It's 1980, and that's Tuck McGraw, former great Mets pitcher, but now he's a Phillies pitcher. And he's celebrating because the Philadelphia Phillies won the World Series. You'd be thinking, that's kind of random. Well, technically, no. There is a reason. There's always a reason. So the Phillies would take on the Kansas City Royals in the World Series. The Royals finally got over the hump, taking out the Yankees in the playoffs after 3 heartbreaking failures, 76, 77, 78 against the Yankees. The Phillies were known as chokers, team that can't win a lot of games and all that. Well, in their franchise history, when they started the modern MLB in 1901 to 1979, they had won no titles. In fact, of the original 16 franchises, 8 in the American League, 8 in the National League, they were the last one to win the World Series. You'd be thinking, hang on, what about like the St. Louis Browns / Baltimore Orioles? Or even the Pirates or the Cubs? No, they were the last. The 8 original American League teams were the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Orioles, well, they were known as St. Louis Browns, the White Sox, the Tigers, the Twins, a.k.a. formerly known as the Washington Senators, the Athletics, well, it was Oakland, but they went through Philly and Kansas City, and the Tribe. The National League had the Phillies, the Pirates, the Braves, the Cubs, the Cardinals, Dodgers, Giants, and the Reds. So anyway, yeah, they were the last team to do it. In fact, this was the first time in World Series history that the World Series was played entirely on artificial turf. It also happened in 85, 87, 93, and 2020. Well, 2020 was the neutral site one. And you'd be thinking, hang on a minute. Kansas City had artificial turf? They have grass. They did. The Royals had artificial turf from the late 70s to the mid 90s. Just to let you know. So yeah, it was a huge one. All that. In fact, this is the last time the World Series happened in 1980 that the two teams did not win had not won a World Series combined. Can you believe it? There's only 6 teams left that can make this a reality. If either San Diego, Milwaukee, or Colorado get to the World Series versus Seattle, Tampa, or Texas. San Diego is in the Final Four as of this taping. But the problem is, Houston and the Yankees both have won a World Series, so that can happen. So anyway, the Royals, took care of the Yankees. The Phillies had a tougher road. The Phillies had to win 2 out of 3 in Montreal on the final weekend to clinch the pennant. And Mike Schmidt, his 2-run home run off Stan Boston, was just heartbreaking for Expo fans. I mean, when you live in Canada, you have to know that. The Phillies actually struggled in the NLCS. It was a classic NLCS versus the Houston Astros. A 5-game series to be sure, especially in Houston at the Astrodome. That Game 5 was just one for the record books. Keith Jackson and Harry Cosell on the mic describing it perfectly. How Philadelphia scrambled their way to win the pennant. But the Phillies looked good. I mean, Mike Schmidt was soon to be the MVP. Steve Carlton would win the Cy Young. Pete Rose was around. This was the second year for Rose on his contract after leaving Cincy, which was shocking enough. With Gary Maddox and Lonnie Smith also playing in that one. The pitching staff was good with Dick Ruffin and, of course, Todd McGraw being the bullpen guy. Kansas City looked pretty good and all that. But they got George Brett, who was the MVP of the AL and almost got 400. Avis Otis was still around. Hal McRae. Frank White was still around. Willie Wilson. Yeah, they looked good. The pitching staff was good. Dennis Leonard and Larry Gura were the heroes. And Dan Quisenberry was the closer. So the World Series started October 14th, 1980, and the Phillies had a 7-4 lead and nearly choked it. Bob Walk beats Dennis Leonard with Todd McGraw picking up the save. So that was huge. In fact, for the Phillies, this was the first time in a while they had won a World Series game. They won Game 1 of the 1915 World Series against the Red Sox, but lost the next 4, and then got swept in 1950 by the Yankees. So this was their first time in 9 tries winning a World Series game. Game 2 saw the Phillies needing 4 runs in the 8th to win 6-4. Steve Carlton was the hero, beating Dan Quisenberry, who was probably in for a big save, and Ron Reed picked up the save himself. So after Bob Boone walked, Dell Unser pinch hit and hit an RBI double, making 4-3. Pete Rose grounded out to get Unser the third, and Bake McBride had a high chopper single to tie the game. Mike Schmidt would hit a RBI double, and Keith Moreland would single to make it 6-4. Game 3 saw the Royals on home turf win in the 10th inning as Quisenberry beat McGraw. Willie Aikens with a single left center. Well, lost in the shuffle, and I forgot to mention it, is what Willie Aikens actually hit 2 home runs in Game 1 of the World Series, but it was all for naught. Game 4 saw the Royals win 5-3 on home turf. Leonard beat Christensen with Quisenberry the save. So it was huge. The Royals looked good and all that. Then Game 5, it looked like Kansas City was going to win again on home turf. They were up 3-2 in the 9th. When they came to the plate, Mike Schmidt led off with an infield single off of George Brett's glove. Dell Unser pinch hit and hit an RBI double that went into the right field corner. After Moreland bunted Unser to third, Gary Maddox grounded out. And then Manny Trio, with 2 outs, hit a line shot off of Quisenberry for an infield hit, which meant, well, Brett almost threw him out, but run scored. Brett struck out, Aikens walked, and was left for a pinch runner. McRae grounded out to shortstop. Otis walked up to load the bases, but Jose Cardinal got taken out on a pitch, 1-2 pitch. And now we get to October 21st, 1980. Steve Carlton versus Rich Gale. It looked good. With lefty on the mound, Philly looked certain. Nothing happened till the 3rd when Bob Boone walked and got to second on the fielder's choice. Pete Rose bunted for a single down the third base line to load the bases. And then Mike Schmidt hit a RBI single to score 2. Rich Gale was yanked for Randy Martin. They were desperate. But thankfully for the Royals, McBride, Lisinski, and Maddox would all go out. In the 5th inning, Lonnie Smith hustled for a double. Advanced to third on a fly ball by Rose. Then Schmidt walked. Paul Splintorf came in. And McBride's slow ground out to shortstop made it 3-0. In the 6th, Larry Boa doubled and then scored on Bob Boone's single to center. So it looked good for the Phillies. The Royals would score 1 run in the 8th. And the Phillies were ready. The city of Philadelphia deployed their police force to take the field with officers on horses and some armed with canine dogs. They didn't want fans to storm in the field. Well, that's fair. Amos Otis led off and struck out. Willie Aikens walked. John Wadham singled. And Cardinal singled. So it looked like the Royals were getting on top of McGraw's nerves. But then came one of the most crazy and underrated plays in World Series history. Frank White popped a foul ball. Boone was ready to catch it, but he bobbled it. But somehow, backing him up was Pete Rose, who swiped the ball and got it before it hit the ground, which meant that was an out instead of a foul ball, out in an E2 possibly. And then McGraw took down Willie Wilson, who whiffed for the 12th time in the World Series, which was a new World Series record for strikeouts in the series. Fortunately for Willie Wilson, he didn't have to live that down, because in 2009, Ryan Howard whiffed 13 times for the Phillies. So anyway, yeah, that was huge. So anyway, Mike Schmidt was the official MVP of the World Series. So, well deserved. The Phillies outscored the Royals 27-23. NBC broadcast this with Joe Garagiola at play-by-play, Tony Kubek and Tom Seaver being color commentators. So, it looked pretty good and all that. So, anyway, yeah. So, anyway, it was huge and all that. This 1980 World Series actually is the highest overall TV ratings, with a Nielsen rating of 32.8 and a share of 56, meaning 56% of American TVs were on that. But you'll never see that again because, of Netflix and all that stuff. So anyway, and it was a good year for Philadelphia in hindsight. In 1980, all four of their professional sports teams played for the championship of their respective sports. But Philly went 1-for-4. The Sixers went to the NBA Finals in 1980, lost to the Lakers thanks to Magic Johnson's rookie campaign. And then 8 days after the Sixers fell, the Flyers, who were supposed to be the winners of the Stanley Cup because, 1980, that was the team that went undefeated in 35 games. Actually went to the finals, but got beaten by the upstart New York Islanders in 6 games, Bob Nystrom's overtime winner. The Eagles would lose Super Bowl 15 in 1981 to the Raiders. Jaworski during those picks to Rod Martin. Family Feud. I remember watching the Family Feud thing with Richard Dawson that the Royals and Phillies faced each other in a rematch. And the Royals took it 3 out of 5. Lonnie Smith would participate in 4 more World Series with 3 different teams. This was the only time Lonnie Smith was a Philly for the World Series. He was part of the 82 Cardinals team that won the World Series, the 85 Royals that won the World Series, and the 91-92 Braves that both times lost the World Series. So anyway, yeah. So that was great that Philly finally got over the hump, don't you think? Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond.